Welcome to Laid Off and Looking. It's a podcast where friends and journalists, Jenna and Dom, we're looking to create a community for anyone who's been laid off, especially journalists, and also analyzing this wildly changing media landscape.
We are recording. We are back.
We're back, Jenna.
Yes.
Who knew? 3 episodes in.
I know. We still have the stamina to do this. Well, listen, so we're back. So let's start. First and foremost, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's been a busy week, not as busy as yours because I know what you've been up to, but it's been a busy week. Of course, applying for jobs on my end, but also actually, because of our new venture here with the podcast, I invested in a microphone.
I can
To
hear.
That sounds great. I'm glad to
I'm right
hear that.
behind you, FYI, for anyone who's listening. It's like, what the hell? I'm right behind you.
And actually, so my nephew works, he's an on-air talent, and uh he also works in the online space, and he helped me get a light. I've got a ring light now. Which I know I was always behind. I never got them before, even though I knew I would do on my Zooms. I don't know. I just never did that. But invested in it. So I have a ring light, and I'm just sort of upping my game in terms of editing and yeah, and doing camera work. It's really interesting. So doing this is really, even though we haven't posted any video, I'm still getting
We're
used to
getting
this part.
there.
We're
We're
getting there
getting there.
slowly getting there. But yeah, so I mean, I think that's been kind of like where I've just sort of been exploring this space. I told you, you and I spoke last week about I wanted to really start a page on Medium.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I am doing good with that. It should be ready to go by Friday. So I am looking forward to having that done. And I mean, that's been it. Like trying to like just, push myself and being creative. And yes, while waiting for somebody to get back, I am also trying to just enrich myself and get a little bit, learn new skills and try to push myself for other things. And trying to do networking as best I can, because I think a lot of the people I know are in the same boat that I am, and so it's a little tough in that way. We're all kind of looking for something, and it's a little bit tough right now. But yeah, yeah. And and saw a couple of good documentaries, which I will. One of them being that Netflix documentary about We Are the World, which I absolutely loved.
Oh my
If you
God.
haven't watched it, I highly recommend it. So yeah. How about you, Jenna?
Okay, so first and foremost, I will say that doing better. The anxiety and stress streams seem to have started to subside a bit. I've been, very much, engaging in my mindfulness. So like starting every day with, my just a short meditation, really like doing my gratitude journaling, all of those things. And so I feel as though my conscious mind is starting to accept that, like, okay, it's unstable right now, but it's going to be okay. But that is my conscious mind. My unconscious mind, unfortunately, was just like, girl, you still don't have a job. So if you're not going to stress out, next stop, your skin. And my face has broken out. And I have the only thing I can think to describe it as is unemployment skin because oh my God. So that is my new thing now, trying to get
you
my skin to calm down.
well, Jenna, can I tell you, you look at the listeners cannot see you, but I see you, and you look
Hmm.
gorgeous as always. So I
Well,
don't say
thank
it.
you so much, but I'm not going to lie. There is a wee bit of makeup on my face and a vanity filter.
Okay.
Real talk. I'm going to keep it 100 because my face, my skin raw right now is very much just like, I, I, do you have any skincare products? It's not okay. So, but as you were saying, a lot has been going on, and I've had a surprisingly busy week. So let's see. First and foremost, big announcement. We are streaming everywhere. I love the way that you called it enrichment,
Yay.
because that's a really good way of describing all of these new skills that we're both learning on the fly.
Yes. Yes.
Enrichment. And so, learning how to get us connected on as many different platforms as humanly possible, that's been a huge thing. So, again, you can listen to us pretty much anywhere you get podcasts now, and that's super huge. And then, other big news, I won 2 Anthem Awards. So,
Yay.
thank you.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. Yes. Okay. So basically, before we did this, actually, the last year that we were both working, I had done a podcast series called After Broad and Market, which was about the 2003 murder of Zakiya Gunn in Newark, New Jersey. She was young, she was queer, she was gender nonconforming, and she was Black. And her murder echoed some of the similarities, had a lot of similarities to the murder of Matthew Shepard, um, in a sense that effectively, not ex explicitly, but effectively, she was killed because of her queerness. Um, and in a moment that I, as a young reporter at the time in Newark, a young public radio reporter, thought was going to be another huge step in the LGBTQ movement, the same way that like national media descended on Laramie, Wyoming,
Hmm.
and like I mean, there were
Hmm.
documentaries about the journalists covering it, and like there was all this stuff that happened. I assumed that this was going to be another moment like that,
Hmm.
and it wasn't. So after Broad and Market is me revisiting the story and not only talking to the people who lived through it, but also going through okay, also going through all of the different ways that it it nothing happened, and how, I guess, shocking that was for me and what that meant and why nothing happened. So anyway,
Hmm.
that's the backstory to After Broad and Market, but it's also been nominated or is up for several other awards. So we'll see what happens as award season continues, but so far 2 awards. Okay.
It's amazing.
Then,
And people should listen to it.
yes,
And they
and
really
that's
should.
also
It's amazing.
streaming
Hmm.
everywhere. It's streaming everywhere. But also then on top of that, I think I'd mentioned at the beginning, the pilot episode, that City and State had reached out to me. We had them on. They have amazing reporters, and they were like, "Hey, do you want to write our Power 100, the top 100 Black leaders in New York list?" And I was like, yeah, sure, absolutely. Not fully thinking through what I was taking on. Now, again, super grateful for having been able to do this. I learned so much about a lot of the people, specifically Black people, obviously, behind the scenes, who are, movers and shakers in New York State. But oh my God, that was a lot of work. So that's out now. So you can also find that on City and State. And then yesterday, last night, I was actually in Newark because there was an event. The Newark Film Festival which started as a response to Sakia's murder, as a way to highlight, support, and uplift Newark's queer community. They're coming into their second year, and they've been getting more and more grant money. And so one of the things that they invited me to do was talk to 2 young filmmakers who were creating work of their own around the murder of Sakia, and to just sort of give them some, I don't know, tips and tricks or whatever. But it was really, really inspiring because for several reasons. One, I forgot how much I love sharing my passion for this work with the next generation or young people. That's A. B, I also forgot how badly I needed not to leave the house, because I've had so many, friends and family come and support me through this time, and, take me out for dinner
Hmm.
or whatever. But this was like me being invited into a space as a respected professional. And when you're unemployed and nobody
Hmm.
will call you back,
Yes.
you forget that, like, no, wait a second. I am respect. And mind you, this is in the same week of me winning 2 awards for work that I had done. You still quickly forget it because it's like, oh my God, I've got
Yes.
these accolades. Hello, anybody. Anybody? Nope. Okay, nobody. That's not what I thought was
Uh,
going to happen. Yeah, so that was super awesome and so needed, and I'm so glad I went for that. Um and then yeah, behind the scenes again, also networking my ass off, applying to jobs, learning marketing. That's an enrichment skill.
mhm, mhm.
I love that you're calling it enrichment. That's how I have to think about this. Of course, prepping the pod with you, which has been great. And the sun came out.
Oh I have to tell you, Jenna, but you called me on, I think it was Saturday. I was going for a run in the park, and I was just like, "I'm in the sun. It feels so damn good." Uh,
God, that also added to it. I was like, this weather plus unemployment is really, this is
uh,
not the vibe at all.
yeah, I don't know if everybody knows New York has been a moment this January. It has been rainy and cloudy, and yes, it's not the worst winter, of course, but it's just the cloudy and not having the sun has been killer. So it's been wonderful to have the sun back out and be and at least get some sun rays in my back in my life. So
Yeah. So, oh my God. So yeah, so there's that. And I mean, it's just been great. But one of the things that we discussed in terms of prepping for the show was that we are now going to try to move into segments. So obviously there's the check-in. I think that's important for anybody who's going through their unemployment journey. And if you have friends who are there, or you are there yourself, please have somebody that just checks in and listens. I think that's super important. So there's that. But then we also now have the headlines of the week. And Dom, first you can explain it and then take it away.
so yes, so we're going to start off with the headlines that um happened this week. The first one that we will start off with is a CNBC article. It's about the U.S. economy added 353,000 jobs in January, so it was much better than was expected. This article was actually by Jeff Cox, and it was posted on February 2nd. And a lot. It's just interesting because you and I were discussing this. It sounds great on paper, and I'm sure it's very good and for some, but when you look at the types of jobs, it's like I was looking over here. So, um, I guess it looks like many of these jobs were job growth was widespread in January, led by professional and business services with 74,000. Significant contributors included healthcare, 70,000, and retail trade, 45,000. So again, job market certainly is changing. I know there's a lot of questions about where we'll be a few months from now. I guess we'll see. Um, but again, in the media industry and the in journalism, it's still a very different story. Now, there's also an article. This is from CBS News from February 1st by Amy Peachy. It's titled "The Job Market is Strong, so why did layoffs double in January?" So this is
Thank
where
you.
things.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, it's a really good article. It breaks down, asks questions and breaks down some of the things that we've discussed. So yes, the nation's unemployment rate is near, I'm reading from the article here.
Hmm.
The nation's unemployment rate near 50% low, wages pulling ahead. At the same time, major companies in technology, finance, media, and other key sectors have all recently announced sizable job cuts with layoffs nationwide, more than doubling in January from a month earlier. So it says over here, U.S. companies in January announced more than 82,300 job cuts, a 136% increase from December, according to new analysis from executive coaching firm Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. Um, and then there's a question here that is asked, is the job market in bad shape? And, it kind of looks at how the job market was definitely, again, from the article, the job market has definitely cooled from the hiring frenzy that occurred in 2021 and 2022. During those years, businesses snapped up workers as the economy began to recover from the initial shock of the pandemic, leading a job market so tight it spurred millions of Americans to switch jobs in search of better pay and working conditions, a trend dubbed the Great Recession. Um, and then basically kind of looking at there's another question here. How do the 2024 layoffs compare with prior years? Excluding January 2023, the January layoffs this year represent the highest number of job cuts announced in the first month of the year since January 2009. Again, this is according to Challenger Gray and Christmas. Why are companies cutting? Uh, while others are shedding workers with a hiring binge during the pandemic, other businesses are refocusing or investing in artificial intelligence, which has prompted job cuts in some of the non AI business units.
Well,
So,
that's not terrifying.
yeah, it, there's one more thing here, I think. Yes, will there be more layoffs in 2024? It says that is likely given the push by many businesses to trim costs. The jobless rate could rise up to 4.1% this year, according to forecasts from Oxford Economics. So again, it's a mixed bag when you really look at this. Yes, in some industries it looks good, but for many of us, um, it's not so good. And so it's kind of, yeah. Um, I don't know. What do you think about that, Jenna?
Well, I think so. One of the things right after we were laid off, and it's weird. There's like psychological stages that you go through, and one of them is just like the shock. Like the only way I could describe it to people was that I felt like I had been shot in the chest with a 12 gauge. Not again comparing to any actual gunshot victim, but just in the sense that like something I don't want to say your heart's been ripped out, but it's just this
Mhm.
massive internal wound. The shock is intense. So I started reaching out to people like I don't know anything. And one mentor said to me was that, what you need to take away from this is that never again will you just have one job. And okay, my traditional brain at first was just like, "Wait, what?" Like, "What wait, what?" No, because again, I've had jobs where like, "Okay, but the one job takes up a lot and like I need work-life balance and like I need down what? I did but um, now as some time has gone on and I can see where, which sectors are laying off people and what are the reasons, whatever. I can completely see a future. I don't like it, but I can see one where there are fewer and fewer salaried workers and more freelance per diem and contracted workers. And so for that to work, yeah, you got to have your indie hustle on. I do not think like it's one of those things where like can versus should. Like, can you do it? Absolutely. Should you do it? That's another question. But I can see leadership being like, this is so much more cost effective because if you do it that way, you don't have to pay for, 401ks, you don't have to pay for people's health care. They
Mhm.
can figure that out on their own. Um, Again, I personally find that incredibly problematic, but at the same time, I can 100% see that coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this off mic, and I think that's the thing that, they're really, unfortunately, once you start this, once the train leaves the station, it's left the
Yeah.
station, and you're not going to change anything. So it really comes down to how do we choose to deal with the situation at hand? And I
Yeah.
think that's what you and I are trying to do. And I think that's what a lot of people are trying to do. It's like people want to work, they want to make a living, but you also have to look at the reality of how the landscape is changing. So, what are the tools that we all need? How do you move forward? And when we talk about things like independent journalism, what does that mean for you? What are you willing to share? And not everybody is capable of also doing that. Not everybody wants to do that.
Oh,
And
completely.
and I
It's like
understand
that
that.
it's like that woman who I mentioned, who you said was like super famous, just to show you how clued in I
Oh yeah.
am. But no, but the notion that there are quite a few very talented journalists who just aren't showy social media people. Like I can definitely make myself do it. I can show up on platforms, by the way, at JFlanNYS. Um, and I'll put it in the show notes again. But it's like, does it come naturally to me? No. Do I feel the need to chronicle every single? No, I don't. But, you know,
But, it does, I think, challenge us to, for instance, this for me, this is social media is something that, I am definitely trying to become more comfortable with. The same thing by doing this. We've talked about that. And I
mhm.
think each week that passes by, you start learning different things and you start learning again what works for you. And I see that it's
Yes.
not one size fits all.
No.
Everyone has a different uh, you know, I guess a a different place that they fit. And so I'm definitely it's terrifying, but it's also exciting at the same time.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of not one size fits all, and this is just for your own social media journey, not all the platforms are equally created. Like, I found a much warmer, supportive community on Threads than, you know, just the hellscape that is Twitter. Um, yeah, so I find
That's
myself engaging more on that platform when it comes to like random updates, or like if I do share a thought, like, everybody was squealing about Tracy Chapman on the Grammys, and I did too, because I was a huge, and still continue to
yes.
be, huge fan. But yeah, when I went to go share something, like, oh my God, I went to Threads. I don't want to go to Twitter. You people are nuts. Which again is probably toxic to say, because most journalists are on Twitter still.
I go to Twitter or X to get the tea on things because I find that that's where you find people spilling all
Oh
sorts
my
of,
God. First of all, I
that's
will keep a Twitter account, because
yes, right?
Black Twitter, in fact, the best tweet that I saw, and this is so terrible, the best tweet that I saw was after King Charles
Oh,
announced that he
yes.
had been diagnosed, which is a very,
Yeah.
very, I my own family has been touched by cancer. So I do want to be very sensitive to that. But somebody tweeted something like, I either have to stay off Twitter for the rest of the day, or I can't go to Scottish or Black Twitter, because I remember what you people did when the Queen died. And the issue wasn't that what I'm gonna see, it's the fact that I'm gonna laugh, because Scottish Twitter, Irish Twitter, Black diaspora Twitter, it's not that
It's
it's snarky, it's funny, it's
it's
legitimately
so
funny.
I'm telling you,
It's,
Twitter,
I want to
it
go to
I
hell. And if I go follow these accounts, I'm gonna go to hell.
shut up. It is to me, like I said, it's where I get all whether it's about the housewives or serious news, because I love my housewives,
Of
or
course.
or Vanderpump or whatever. But it's like I really do find that it does serve a purpose. It's just that's what I think of when I think of social media and I think of the toxicity.
Mhm.
That's the place that I think of, but that's the place that I go to. It's nice to hear you saying something about threads and about something that's a more supportive.
I
That's good to
really
hear.
have found a much warmer community on Threads, where people are really trying to engage with other people in a meaningful way. Like, I keep seeing follow trains pop up where, like, follow me, I'll give you a follow back. And they seem genuine. Like, there hasn't been much in terms of trolling. It's
That's
just
good.
fresh air. Anywho,
All right.
I
I
know.
have another headline, and this one
Okay.
is uh this is a media company, but this is from The Guardian, uh Blake Montgomery, and this was posted on February 5th. It was basically about the headline is Snap Inc. cuts 510 employees, 10% of workforce to boost in-person work. The California-based social media company will focus on in-person collaboration after eliminating jobs multiple times in recent years. It says Snap is among several tech industry announcing layoffs. Microsoft is laying off some 1,900 employees in its gaming division, according to an internal company email. Um, eBay laid off 1,000 employees last week, roughly 9% of its workforce. PayPal laid off, I guess, 2,500 in mid-January. Google cut 1,000. So even the, tech social media industry, like everyone is feeling it and just keeps adding up. While at the same point, there was an announcement. by so this was in the Hollywood Reporter by Alex Weprin, and it says basically it's about how Disney, Warner, and Fox plan to start their own sports streaming platform, combining coverage. This sounds wild. The
What
Untitled
does that
platform will
happen?
go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking out loud, like, what happens to all of the different sports journalists who work for those separate individual platforms? Like, do they all get swallowed up, or are like,
Let's see over here. It says like basically Untitled streaming platform will offer live linear channels like ESPN, ABC, Fox, TNT, and TBS, and games and other sports rights from all three media giants on a non-exclusive basis. The service will be available directly to consumers, but will also be available as a bundle with WBD's Max, Disney's ESPN Plus, and Hulu. And it's going to start in the fall. The three companies will each own one third of the new venture, which will have its own brand and independent management team. The deal is contingent on the parties coming to terms on a final agreement, though they have already have one in principle. So yeah, it seems like it's just going to be one platform for people to share to get all this. It's just interesting to see these media giants.
I mean, I
I
get
guess
how that, I guess, helps all the CEOs or whatever, but I don't understand how this benefits literally anyone else.
I don't know. It's interesting because you start wondering again, yes, like you said, like I guess in this landscape, it's so difficult right now to just imagine how do I don't know. It's just it's I'm trying to understand this and where it's going, but I guess there'll be more information as it comes around and we'll see where this all goes. But those were the headlines that I saw so far. So guess do you want to take it from here and go to our next
Sure.
segment?
Yeah, let's go to our next segment, which is the topic of the week. So tying into our episode title, Predator, I don't know her. Um, so basically, this was my idea, and that came from, I think last week I had mentioned the notion of the predator, the producer slash editor, and that was one thing. And so, first of all, obviously, I wanted to clarify, I didn't mean that those are obviously two different jobs. I didn't mean that they were one thing, but that I think it's one thing to ask an employee to juggle both of those jobs. Um, but in my what has now become obsessive LinkedIn use, I came across a post and discussion about more and more employers, especially in the creative sector, let's say, asking for these multifaceted roles that don't really seem to be taking into account the depth and breadth of the skills that are required for each one of the jobs underneath all of these, like, must be, proficient in, like, and then run off a list of like 30 different things. So my point was this: yes, a person, one individual can do, or more importantly, what I really think is a person or individual can touch on all of these skills, but a lot of them are specialized and take years to master. And if one person is trying to do everything, um, just overall, the quality is going to go down. Something is going to suffer. And those kind of jobs, they just burn people out quickly. And I get that, maybe for the company or whoever's hiring for that, well, then we'll just get somebody else. Like, there's any number of people who do this for a living. But I don't know. I also, I guess, as a working creative, um, I, j- I worry that, like, now the whole thing is just like use them and burn them out, use them and burn them out, use them and burn them out in another cost cutting measure.
Yeah, I number one, I always hated the name Predator because it's a gross name.
It
So
is.
I never understood why they went with that name. I mean, I get why they did, but somebody should have looked it up and said, this does not work.
This
But that's number
sounds wrong.
this sounds wrong on many levels. So number one, the title itself is problematic. But the fact that you have, yeah, I agree. I think, you know, because we are in a time where so many people are editing for their own social media,
Hmm.
the fact that they're doing all of these things for it just it I understand. It's like, oh, this sounds like a great idea. Let's just start blending these jobs together and have somebody who becomes one-stop shopping. And for certain markets, sometimes that might what can they can only afford if you're talking about smaller markets or smaller organizations that maybe have people to kind of try and do everything. I do think, though, like you said, I think it's always when you think about the scope of these things, and that's the fact that, when it becomes mainstream and everyone that is expected to do multiple jobs, what is it that saying, master of none, or
Yeah,
I
quite
forgot the name,
literally.
you
Um,
know,
oh God,
this
now
is
I'm
so bad
forgetting
that
the
I can't
name of the
remember.
city. I know, I literally, it
Jenna.
just left my brain. I could feel it
Jenna.
running out of my brain.
I have to look it up because
Jack of all trades, master of none.
yes,
Even though that's
but
not the full quote, I've read somewhere that there's like, hold on, you keep talking, I'm going to look for the full quote because there's
but
more to it.
basically, thank you, please, because we have to make sure we get that right. But I really do think that that's the only thing is the fact that you like you said. I think uh, you can sometimes then just not appreciate the work that somebody who specializes in that field does. And also the work that goes into it's like somebody who talks about social media. You know how there are lots of corporations like, oh yeah, just post something on social. And people who think that it's just such a
Throw it
basic
up on
thing,
social. I'm
but
sorry, throw
there's,
what where?
it's like there are certain jobs that just aren't as, I don't think as much, um, I don't know if the respect for the work that's being done is the right word, but I do think there are some people who just sort of get, again, social media is an example, editors are an example, producers are an example. I think that's something that can be part of a job, but I do think when that becomes the expectation, you lose something. So it's okay to have people like to know that people know a little bit of everything. I think we as journalists, aren't we always curious? Like we're always like we'd like to know we can do a little bit of everything, but in the end, we always do like to go to the person who's an expert in this field. We have friends who are editors, friends who are, and we'll be like, "Hey, can you fix this up?" You know what I mean? So, and
Hmm.
they do that, and I have so much respect for them and for what they're doing. So I think that's yeah, it's just trying to make sure that this doesn't become the norm.
Yes, exactly. But I also do want to acknowledge that, a lot of journalists have been very, very good at multitasking a lot of
Yes,
things when it
yes.
comes to pro- producing and pushing out the work that they've done. Like, I mean, just, and I'll get into that later in the show, but because other people have also acknowledged that journalists really have like learned to swim in so many different waters. But still, I guess I don't know. I become really concerned about the idea of people just overworking themselves in the
Hmm.
name of it. It just I don't know. Like you know what it is? The overworking of your employees in the name of saving money. It's giving like again hyperbole, but like what was it? The shirt factory in New York. Like it's just it feels like labor rules are we're finding ways to roll it
Mm,
back. Like I know
hmm.
what the law says, but here's what the law conveniently doesn't say. So we're gonna squeeze that in. Oh God. It just yeah. Anyway. Okay, here we go. The full quote allegedly is this: Jack of all trades, master of none, though oftentimes better than master of one.
Oh, well,
Yes. Meaning that it's better to, I guess, be a little good at everything than be good at
just
nothing, which I think everyone can agree with. Like,
I
I
think
would,
so
yes,
too. I think again, I think uh, listen, we're talking about journalists, but I do think it applies everywhere for any
yeah,
kind of job where it is good to know a little bit about every position where you're at.
absolutely.
That's how we all grow in our jobs. As a producer, I actually started as an intern and built up to a production assistant to an AP to a producer to a, you know what I mean? Like, and then
Yeah.
ending with an executive producer and going up to an executive producer. But I mean, like, that's part of, I think, the deal is learning all the different skill sets and also knowing you can jump in if you ever need to help. But
Absolutely. And remember reading an article somewhere, and this is one of the things that I think is so uh, critically essential about. I mean, if I'm going to toot our horns, people like you and me who have risen up through and didn't step in as upper management, or I haven't just been talent, is that when you do need to jump in and step in, you can engage with somebody doing a job that you used to do with a level of respect and understanding of what they're dealing with as well.
mhm,
Like I think we both work
mhm,
with people who have, because they were in a leadership position, have jumped in, and it was much more of like a down talking dictator. You need to da 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 da. When it's just like, do you have any idea what I'm already juggling?
mhm,
So
definitely.
I think that's, I mean, again, if I were a hiring manager, that would be something that I would definitely look for, not just somebody who just stepped into, but has worked their way up. Not only does it show a level of conviction, determination, grit, all those other things, but you have such a broader understanding of how the whole thing works, be it working in a newsroom, which is where my experience is, but for any role.
Well, because in the news department, there's also editorially that you have to be aware. So some people, I think, when you're stretching so many different ways, something like you said before, there can be something that slips through the cracks that we miss because you are so stretched thin.
That's what I'm
I,
saying, is that
yeah,
something gives. Something like you stretch people too thin, and the product you're going to deliver is going to be less than, because no one person can keep their eye on 30 balls.
yep,
Yes,
totally agree.
can you juggle them? Yes, but can you like immediately, say like at any given moment where each particular ball, like, just anyway. I don't know, maybe juggling isn't the right um comparison, but it just, I worry about that. But anyway, so that was one of the things that I wanted to discuss, and that's where PredItor, I don't know where it comes from. Um, I do know PredItor, obviously, but it just feels like it's starting to get to be too much. But moving on, there's also, we both talked about the fact that we are applying for jobs, and I'm starting to wonder about I guess, if there should be strategy to applying for jobs. Because do you go for just anything, like, I don't know, they're hiring, so I'm going to apply? Or do you focus in on your passion, where you know your skill sets thrive the most?
You know, for me right now, it's been trying to focus more on the latter, the passion part, or
Hmm.
I feel like, but that's because of where I'm at in terms of at this very moment, I
Hmm.
feel I want to focus on that. And you want to work, it's like I want to be able to look at someplace and say, like, I find this place really interesting and the work they're doing, and I want to give that a shot first. I will say, like, probably in the back of my mind, I have an idea of when I might have to shift and
Hmm.
look to apply for jobs that are, listen, I mean, I'm not going to apply just for anything, but it's like you just try to think in the back of your head, like, this is, I want to really apply for the places that really hit me and say, like, that's, I believe in that, or I'm so into that, as opposed to just, you know, feeling, again, everybody is looking at how we do need to work and it's so competitive. So you can't also just think I'm going to hold out for that one job. And it's
Oh,
not like that's all I'm
completely.
applying for, but you just sort of look at what your skill sets are and where do you want to take them to and where do you want to grow? Because and where do you think you could help where you fit in most? So I think you have to have some type of connection, at least at this point for me, I do. I need to feel like I'm connected somewhat. So that's where I'm at this moment. How about you?
No, that's for the most part, that's where I'm at. And I say for the most part because, I read or hear from other people who are talking about applying for jobs, or, people who are like job coaches, here's how
Hmm.
you transform your life. Um, and being open to other possibilities. I so far have kept the other possibilities that I think that I could be open to or would be good in, to things that seem to fit my skill set still. But yeah, that's for the most part, I'm still focused in on, like I absolutely love being a journalist. I also really, really love being a host. And how do I take that skill set that not only do I feel sublimely happy and confident in, but how do I work that on the open marketplace? And is the marketplace even really looking for that?
Hmm.
Because there's sometimes it does feel like when you're looking for what's available, it can sometimes feel like it's not a girl, it ain't even about you. It's what's out available or not. And if what you want to do
Yeah.
isn't an option,
Right.
which then, of course, leads me into my other question. Like you mentioned, when does holding out become delusional? And that came to mind because, so you remember
But
that,
I just want to
what?
say, use the word, the word I love. You used it yesterday.
Oh, Delulu. When does the Delulu kick in?
Yes.
Okay, here's why I two things that I thought of when I think of that. One is, did you see? I feel like it's one of the classic Christmas movies, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation.
Oh, yes.
Okay, all right. So in that movie, the Randy Quaid character, they pull up obviously to the Griswold's house in their like motorhome or whatever, and the two moms are talking to each other, and they're just like, so I can't remember what the character's name is, but it's Randy Quaid's character. And so wait, he still hasn't found a job. He's been out of work for whatever. And his wife is like, well, he's holding out for something in management.
Yeah.
Now, the joke is this man is not managed. What? He's never going to get a job in management. That's ridiculous. And so but sometimes I do wonder, like, am I Randy Quaid and I just don't know? Yeah. Oh my God. If I am, oh my God. Why has no one told me? Okay. So there's that aspect of it. And then also, very recently, comedian Cat Williams gave this phenomenal, I, I hesitate to call it an interview because, listen, all respect to Shannon Sharp, whose show, Club Shay Shay or whatever it's called, that Cat
Yeah.
Williams was on, but Shannon is not a journalist. Anyway, the point is, of the many things that Cat says in that monologue, let's call it, at one point he said, um, to be confident and not delusional is a skill. And that's what I really am trying to hold on to. I want to be confident in who I am and what I bring to the table without going to the Delulu place
Yes.
where I become Randy Quaid.
Or I think of American Idol. I haven't watched that in forever, but like the early days, you would have the contestants who would go on, and they're the ones uh, who I believed were being authentic and thought could sing, and you're like, oh, you're not going. I mean, it's not going to happen. But that's where, from I agree. It's like there are some, and yet they're like, I am holding out. I believe I have it. I'm going to make
Okay.
it.
But here's the one other thing is that when I think especially of American Idol, um, what was that kid's name? Um, it was something Hung. Anyway, this kid comes on. He cannot say, he comes out. You know how they have their afterward interview where they're just like,
Yes.
I don't care. The judges don't know what they're talking about. He comes out and he's like, well, I did what I could. I tried my best. And for some reason, him saying I tried my best must have resonated with all of America because we made his god awful cover of She Bangs a hit.
Oh
William
my
Hung,
goodness.
that was his name.
I I I forgot about that song. Shelley, why did you remind me?
Sorry,
But
because whenever I think of American Idol and the delusional kids, I'm like, But are they delusional? Because sometimes the rest of the country is just like, we are going to be delusional with you
But I give,
because I tried my best
yes,
too.
yes, but that's Randy
Sorry.
Quaid, Randy Quaid, William Hung. This is where we.
He was, I'm pretty sure that song charted and it
Yeah,
was
I'm sure it did.
really,
It was, but those are the things that you think of. It's like you're right. Where you just try to make you have to check yourself and, like you said, really think about what it is that what are your skills and what is realistic for you. And I think that's something that we all have. If sometimes it might be good to talk to a friend too, because I find sometimes many people can be so just not take enough credit for themselves, which I'm sure, you know what I mean? Like,
yes, my imposter syndrome is hella guilty of that.
so I think that's the thing too, is you can downplay, like, and not realize what you bring to the table. So I think there's that, hopefully people try to figure that part out too, is like, don't undersell yourself. We all have so many skills, especially we as journalists have so many skills that can relate to so many different fields. And yet, you know, give yourself that credit of what you're doing, and just make sure that that's important. That's really important, that you don't, but at the same point, yes, you don't want to be Delulu either.
No, you don't want to be Delulu. Okay, so furthering down this point,
Yes.
is that so applying to jobs, a lot of them involve like you have to go through some sort of online job portal situation. And two things. One, applying to some of those jobs has on through those portals has gotten me on some seriously weird uh email lists for like, oh, you're looking for a job? Here's what else. Now, I want to say this with full respect because um while all work is not valued the same way in our culture, um, at the same time, and I fully acknowledge that my ego as it is at play here. There are also jobs where after everything that I have done with my career and the work that I put in and the sacrifices that I made, um, I just I just don't see cashier. I just what? But and I have gotten, like, hey, the local grocery store in your neighborhood is looking for like, someone to stock shelves, and our algorithm says you'd be perfectly qualified for that. It irks the living crap out of me, and frankly, is low key depressing. But I also try to remember, and I'm gonna Google his name right now. Okay. Oh God, what is the actor? Okay, so the actor's name is Jeffrey Owens, and a lot of us remember him as Elvin from The Cosby Show. And The Cosby Showed for a while, and then the show came to an end, and we all know Bill Cosby, whatever. The point is this: I want to say it was like a Twitter picture, or maybe it was on Reddit of popped up of what ended up being him bagging groceries at Trader Joe's. And initially people were clowning him. And they were like, you used to be on TV and now, you bagging groceries and how the mighty have fallen, all this other stuff. And a lot of people were just like, excuse me, this man is working and, doing whatever he needs to do to feed his family, etc. And, being in Hollywood, which I don't know how people have the stomach for that, but
Hmm.
yeah, like sometimes it can get hard and you need to do what you need to do. And so I tried to keep that in mind. But again, I'm not going to lie. There a part of me where my ego is just like, um, I don't want an instance where, like, hey, didn't that girl, the one that's refilling all the cereal boxes, wasn't she on TV? I feel like I saw her on TV. Or
You know,
that woman, I'm not that girl anymore, but that woman, I'm pretty sure I saw that woman who's like, hauling boxes into the back of the store. I'm pretty sure I saw her on TV. I
I
don't know. It doesn't look like her, but I think it's her.
it's well, I had just recently listened to a Mark Maron podcast episode. What the fuck is the name of the podcast? And he had Jonah Ray Rodriguez on,
Hmm.
and Jonah is a comedian and actor. I've seen his work, and during the strike, during the actor strike and writer strike, he was I and I don't know if he started because I'm just trying to remember this now, but I don't know if he started then, but he was bartending.
Hmm.
And, you know, he still is bartending. And he says because he likes it and he likes the money and he likes being able to have the flexibility to act and work and do. So, I think like, you know, and and Mark was asking him this question as if to say, like, well, is like, why are you still doing it though now? He's like, because I enjoy it. And I think all of us, there are lots of jobs that are totally out of maybe this things that we're doing that I think for me makes sense, but it makes sense if um when you're ready to be there. And I mean what I mean by that is the fact that, you know, I don't know. I think like when you're looking for a particular job to stay in your field
Hmm.
and you're really trying to look for that specific job, sometimes yeah, things change. And I'm open to it. But when that's the first thing that comes at you and it's sort of like you know what I mean? Like when something is complete, it's like if honestly sent me a job to be a banker or somebody sent
Yeah.
me a job to go work in the medical field. Like I don't have that experience and it's not even on my radar. So it's kind of like when jobs come out of nowhere, it's like, where did you
Well,
get
yeah,
that
that's what
from?
happens when you get on some of those random
It's like,
job lists. Yeah.
what makes you think that I can wait, where did that come from? Like, how
You
did you
would make a great hospital janitor. Like, first of all, I love myself, I love my body, but I'm sorry, I find the human body disgusting and parts of my own body, ugh. So, anybody else? Absolutely not. I'm sorry, I can't do that.
I there listen,
No.
working in the financial field, I would have I would be like, what am I doing here? I don't want to do
Well, I
this.
mean, between you, me, and whoever might be listening to this, I've heard quite a few people who work in the financial field. That's the vibe. You get in, you make your money, and you get out.
But, it's like where it's that's my thing, the randomness of some of these sites, it's sort of like just pulling you out of it's like pulling out of somewhere, it's like, I don't know, yeah, sure, try this. It's like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And that can really be depressing because it would be like
Yes,
it's like either there are jobs that I look at and I'm like, but I really don't have the skill set to do this, or there are jobs that are just like
100%.
I could do, but it's like, why did you come up with this for me? Like, where did that come from? So those are the questions.
1,000. Where did you come from? And I'm sorry, some of this is insulting. Based on your skills, you'd be great at it. What?
So I find it fascinating and it can be frustrating, especially when you just start out because especially when you just start out, you're really looking for something very specific.
Yes, and I
And
do also want to be honest. My ego is still hella wounded.
it's okay. It's okay. I hear you. I totally hear you. But that's the thing. It's like it can be frustrating because you just feel like, where did this site come up with this information about me? And why it's like, why am I wasting my time looking at stuff that either I don't have the skill set for or I'm not interested in? And again, it's not about the job. It's about just like, let's get better. Let's get better at job sites. Let's get better.
It is. And I mean, before we leave this point, more or less, I guess one of the other things is that it's so like, I understand like a job. Like a job is just a thing you do to get a paycheck. But my God, I found my passion. I know what I want to do and I know what I'm good at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It just
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
why would you waste my email space with that nonsense? Just irks the crap out of me. All right. So I say all of that to say that at this point, I'm really starting to reach a point where I'd much rather apply to a job with a contact at the company. Meaning, like, yeah, I'll apply through the portal because it has to go through the portal. But I would also much rather, like, if I had an email to directly email somebody. Doesn't mean that they're going to call me. Nobody has as of this point. But, but still, like, for that feels like it's worth my time and effort to craft of, very specific personal passionate cover letter, to go through all the time and energy of, reorganizing my resume so that it really really speaks to how my skills fit for this job. That feels like it makes sense. And the reason why I say that is because around the same time that we got laid off, I discovered a book called The Algorithm by, and I'm going to try to pronounce her name correctly, Hilke Schellerman, I believe. And basically, her book breaks down how AI is getting used to filter out resumes and, according to the book's title, quote, decides who gets hired, fired, and monitored at work, and why people should fight back now. One of the things that caught my attention was that poorly written algorithms, because again, like a company could be like, oh, great, like you were mentioning, companies are leaning on AI for stuff. But unless you know how that algorithm is written, there's stuff that you could be missing, like the bias that we know for a fact so
Mhm.
frequently gets written into those codes. And like I'm pretty sure there was a woman who worked at like Google or something, like a black woman who tried to like raise this as a red flag and got fired for it. Shocker. But that basically algorithms can add to the discrimination against women and people of color. And oh, guess what intersection I sit at? So
Mhm.
I really don't want to engage with some of these like just random platforms. It just, again, it's something else. And I'm just like, this feels like a waste of time. I
Mhm.
have to do it to prove to
Mhm.
unemployment that I'm doing it,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it legitimately feels like a waste of time.
Mhm.
So,
Er,
you know, that's just one of my other things. And so again, that brings me back to how do I reconsider, or not reconsider, because I don't want to say reinvent, because I really don't feel like I want to reinvent my career, but I do feel like I need to perhaps reapproach it um, from a different angle, and perhaps consider other things that, again, where my skill set is going to thrive in, but perhaps I hadn't considered before as options for me to do.
I feel like that's again, it goes back, a lot of us are falling into that right now within this journalism and media field because we don't really have a choice in the matter. It's, you're losing your job. There aren't as many jobs being posted, so the opportunities are being taken away from you. So then it becomes, well, what do we do? As,
Yeah.
it's, and how do we approach it? And I
And
agree,
what do
it's
you
not.
do when like you've poured your heart and soul into something and that might not be an option anymore?
So I think that's why I look at what we're doing and what I'm sure many others are doing by starting podcast, writing, doing so many different things that maybe I'm not even familiar with. But I think that it's trying to figure this part out. It's the only thing you can do, and I hope if there's anything we can instill in people is to still take chances and still try and be creative some way because
Chances for enrichment. I really
that's
like that you're calling this enrichment. Because when
that's
I was cursing at the computer, I no, this is enrichment.
it's exactly it. We're enriching our life skills. You know what I mean? We're enriching them. We're telling them we're giving you more. But it really is. This is where I think people can. This is a test for a lot of us
Mhm,
who are in this same space. It's like it's a test of you know what are we made of, and what are you willing to do? Um, It might not exactly be what we were familiar with. Like you discussed earlier about the salaried job and how it's changed, you know? So, we really do have to say like to ourselves like, okay, so it might not be exactly what I've had before, but how can I change this? What can I do to that will is relevant to the time that we're in right now?
mhm.
And how can I really turn it into a living. And there might be times, as we've said before, where you have to do multiple jobs. That is where we are all at. People who have full-time jobs and still do part-time work on doing their own podcasts, doing their own social media accounts until they're able to maybe leave their jobs where they were felt so secure because they want to be their own independent worker. And I think and start their own business. I think that's great. I think that's the other thing too. Maybe this is all shifting to people to become a lot more entrepreneurial, which a lot of us didn't think of because we
But
worked
it's
at a
more
place.
chances for enrichment.
There you go. You know what, Jenna? I love the fact that you know this. I love the fact that we have skills right now that we wouldn't have had. And I'm not saying I want to go through this, but if I am, I'm so glad to be doing this with you because you've inspired me.
1000%.
You really have inspired me, and but it also has really pushed me to feel a lot more to use my creative skills in a very different way. And so I think that's the thing that we're all trying to sort of figure out, because then after that it's like, well, okay, I love this, but how do I do it and make money at the same time, like a significant amount of money that makes me feel good? That's the part. But
Yes. Yes. Well, yes, because I you sort of touched on this, but I guess the last point to this conversation was that the pandemic taught us all that, there's the importance of a work-life balance. And so how do you, or can you, when you're unemployed, can you strike that balance? Because there's always, now, again, we're in a place right now where we're also getting this podcast off the ground. Um, so there's a hell of a lot more work to be, that we're
mhm.
doing. But, you know, that security, I guess, of being able to just check out and zone out, I've been struggling with being able to really truly do that because no matter, even if I'm like not quote unquote working at the moment, in the back of my head, there's a long list of like, okay, but did you reach out to this person? Did you da? I mean, you applied to a couple of jobs. Maybe you could apply to one more. Did you check this? Did you check that? Did you update? Did you da? And like, I mean, it's just constantly running in the back of my head, which is probably why my skin is breaking out.
I um you know Yes, I think I actually have found ways to still try to maintain, like, you know this, I love going for my runs. I go for a run like 5 days a week.
Hmm.
It's really important for me. Um, and then I do try and disconnect at a certain point. And because I do feel my mind needs to rest, I need to go out once or twice a week at night to meet up with friends. I know, people can look at that negatively and think, well, how could you even bother going out, hanging out with friends? You should just be looking for work. It's like, but you know what? That really helps enrich my life. It helps me with my creativity, being able to, we shouldn't feel guilty that every once in a while we need to go out for dinner with a friend and talk, and not just talk about, I lost my job. Sometimes I don't want to talk about that. Sometimes I just want to talk about something funny. Like the Super Bowl's coming up this week. Now, I don't watch the Super Bowl. I mean,
You're not watching
I'm
the
not,
Taylor Swift Bowl?
I would watch if it was a Taylor Swift concert happening, that would be different.
Oh,
But
I
I'm
was
saying
gonna be like, if you said if Taylor Swift, I'm like, oh, she's gonna be there
I know
and
she's
on
gonna be
camera.
there. I know she is, but like I have to watch the game then on top of it, and I'm not gonna do that. I can't watch the game. It doesn't. I'm not a football fan. It's fine. It's just not my deal. Um, but I guess I say that to be like, we still should be able to, even though someone is unemployed, you shouldn't be made to feel guilty of the fact that every once in a while you need to disconnect. You need to like ground yourself because that will help you in maybe an idea that you have. You're talking to a friend about something, or you hear somebody talking about something, and it spurs an idea that you might not have thought of. The fact that your brain needs to rest every once in a while. Um, Being at home can really get in your head if you're isolated, especially for many of us who are single, who
Hmm.
don't have anybody. Like, yes, you check in with friends and family, but it's very different when you live alone. And you it can be isolating. It can make you feel a certain way, like it's it could be depressing. So that's why I choose to be like, I need to go out and I need to be around people.
Yeah.
Even if I'm bringing my laptop or my phone with me and I'm writing or I am, applying for a job, I've got to be in an environment like that because I do think when you are like single, it adds a different dimension to that. And so, yeah, and I don't think we should feel guilty about it. So that's why I love the fact that you went out last night. It was it was networking, but at the same point too, socially, it was such an important thing to do, Jenna, for you. And you need to do that more,
Yeah.
even when it's not about a job or not about it doesn't always have to be tied to, networking or something. You deserve it. You have earned it. You've worked your ass off and you deserve that.
Well, thank you so much because, and I do need to remind myself of that. Um,
We
yeah,
all do. We all do because we all get into that space. You're again, especially I really say that when you're single, you really do, and it's just really tough sometimes when you're living alone and it can get in your head and make you feel a certain way. And I think that's why you need sometimes just to check in with people and be like, let's go out and let's walk in the park or let's go get a drink or let's go have dinner and let's talk about fun shit like
yeah.
the Lulu. and and Randy Quaid specifically from
National
National Lampoon's
Lampoon's Christmas
because
Vacation.
other Randy Quaid stuff I'm not so sure about, but
Well, I mean, listen, specifically, that's, yeah,
but
very
yeah, but that's
specific to that character.
yes. So but yeah.
Well, okay, so again, I forgot to set the timer, so I'm thinking we're at an hour-ish, but I also did not want to forget we have one other very important segment that we've added to the show, and that is spotlighting journalists. So as opposed to the headlines, this is just like something that we read that really spoke to us.
Do you want to go? You want to start off?
Sure. Now, because I've been obsessing, and after what you just said to me, I'm starting to realize maybe not healthy, but because there's so much still journalists who are employed and who are doing work that's amazing, but I'm just like, what is happening to our industry? So I read a piece in Fast Company by Ryan McCarthy, and it's titled "Why Does Journalism Seem Like It's Collapsing? Call it market failure." And so basically, in a nutshell, he lists a bunch of different things. Social media traffic is dropping. Search engines like Google aren't really pushing. They changed their algorithm. Again, I don't know, relying on an algorithm that you don't know 100% of what it is doing seems problematic. It seems like a quick, easy fix. But anyway, so sorry, that's just my algorithm issue. Um, but anyway, so Google changes algorithm, which also changes the way that I guess news stories get pushed. And like I said, like, platforms like Facebook and Twitter, they're not prioritizing news in the same way that they were. Um, so in the article, there was a quote that someone needs to address the source of power. That quote, there needs to be some sort of government action to push these companies to raise the visibility of journalism. And then another quote says that platforms need to elevate not need to, excuse me, let me say this correctly. Platforms are currently elevating low quality information and deplatforming high quality information. And to me, that speaks to the way that misinformation gets spread because headlines for some outlets can be written in a very misleading way. And that's all some people ever
Mhm.
read. They'll click on it because, oh my God, that got an emotional reaction out of me. Of course, I'm going to click on it. And, there's just a short little blurb. You're not really reading the whole thing. And so that allows for either someone to read into a misleading headline with what fill in the gaps of whatever information confirms their personal biases, or um, it can be absolutely wrong and incorrect. But I don't know. It looked like an article, so and a lot of people don't necessarily know how to tell the difference between an actual, written article and something that was generated by a bot. And again, I don't want to lay blame because a lot of these sites have gotten very good at making their bot generated nonsense look like a news article. But also, and the News Literacy Project broke this down, um, is that people also don't necessarily know the difference between reporting and opinion.
Mhm.
They just assume it's all the same. Okay. Lastly, the article also mentioned that the way the free market approaches this can distort things further, making bigger or less scrupulous players even more powerful. And that's, a lot of people when it comes to, okay, we have to fix something, just let the free market fix it. And like, no, I go back to the first quote. There needs to be some sort of government action to push these companies to raise the visibility of journalism. But what I found to be the most telling in the whole piece was this quote. Since 2005, the US has lost almost 1/3 of its newspapers and roughly 2/3 of its newspaper journalists. Getting into this industry or staying in it now amounts to an exercise in beating the odds. Getting the news you want or need is perhaps even tougher given that more than half of US counties have little to no access to local news.
Wow.
And yeah, exactly. The other side of this that isn't really in this piece, but also I feel concerned with, is not only is staying in this industry an exercise in beating the odds, but as we know in America, beating the odds is going to be more in favor of people with more resources. And so, who are the voices that are going to be marginalized further and silenced because you can't afford to, work for no money or incredibly low salaries because this is really more of a hobby. I'm not supporting a family off of this or something like that.
Mhm.
Like, those were the things that really is starting to also freak me out in the larger sense is oh my god, where does this leave us, and who is this going to leave out if we continue down this path?
Fascinating. I can't wait to read that, Jenna.
Well, I'll put the link in the show notes. And then very quickly, I had one other piece that I know we said we were only going to do one, but I saw this at the last minute. I didn't even put it in our notes for each other. And this was from the Neiman Lab, and this was from last year. This goes under the "you were warned" file. Um, Predictions for journalism for 2024. This came out, when was this published? Do I see a date on this? I don't know. Oh, no, that's not a date. I don't know when this is. Oh, December of 2023. All right. Oh, right when we were laid off. Okay. So anyway, this was written by Robert Hernandez, and he talks about, how in working in newsrooms, journalists have been just unbelievably adept at adapting to new technologies. Here it says, countless examples of how, despite not having appropriate resources, journalists have done more with less and succeeded in producing quality products across the growing landscape of modern journalism. And lists, all the different ways that journalists have showed up to make sure that their work, at least they try to push it to as many people as possible. Then goes on to say, journalists are not the problem. Editorial management, aka newsroom leadership, is no longer the problem. Um, and then goes on to say that, wait, where is the other part of this article? Oh, okay. What I'm saying is it's time to hold our business executives accountable. Look at your boss. Chances are they aren't making the business decisions, just putting them into practice. They may tell you we need a TikTok presence or it's time to, leave X, or AKA Twitter, for whatever other platform. But they don't have a clue how these new products will be converted into revenue. And basically, it goes on to say that when it comes to layoffs, I should have given the title of the article is "The Wrong People Will Be Laid Off Again." And it talks about the fact that as these as revenues fall and platforms change, the people who actually make the content are the ones who are going to lose their jobs, and the people who don't fully, let's say, understand the decisions that they're making or are making impulsive decisions or what have you, they will remain in place.
Awesome.
Yeah,
So interesting. I
it's
love
super
this.
interesting. And again, it was like, wow, so you totally predicted
Yeah.
all of this.
Yeah.
And here we are.
And here we are.
Anyway, so your articles.
Okay. So now I think I chose podcasts to actually focus on. It is called Plain English, and it is hosted by Derek Thompson, who
Hmm.
also writes for The Atlantic. I think he focuses on tech and culture. It was just posted on February 6th, and I believe basically the podcast was titled "The Gender War Within Gen Z." And it's about an hour long, so it's a bit of a listen, but I mean, you listen to us for an hour.
I know we've been talking
I
for an hour.
I know everybody is staying to the very end of this show, so I'm sure
Of
I loved
course,
it.
Dominic, we are delightful.
I giving a little bit of a synopsis here. It says in the past few years, young women have been shifting to the left while young men have been shifting to the right. What's behind this schism? And basically it goes into how why it's a really interesting concept of, Gen Z, these younger men who are actually becoming more conservative at a time where a lot of younger men used to veer more liberal. Um, and it ties into a lot of different things. I've read, there have been a few studies that have been published um, about this very issue from the UK and from here. And it seems some people tie it to the Me Too movement, um, where some younger men believe that opportunities are being taken away from them. And therefore, it ties into the election, because obviously there becomes this sort of uh, divide, and what political party is looking to attract which, you know, group. So it's a really interesting because it's going to have major implications in our politics and how um, so I just think it's fascinating. So I definitely recommend people take a listen to that. Um, and the other one, since now before we jumped on, you and I talked briefly. I was like, oh, I'm torn between this discussing this, or there was another article. It was a New York Times article. So now that we did two, I'm going to throw this one out there. It was a New York Times article. It was from last week. And it was called "Watch Me Lose My Job on TikTok." Some tech workers are filming their layoffs and sharing them on social media. They say it's part catharsis, part transparency. And the article is written by, let me just look right here. It is written by Yi Wen Lu. I hope I'm pronouncing their name correctly.
Hmm.
But really, it's something you and I have discussed. We've seen it on TikTok. We've shared these videos where they profile two or three people in the article, and you know uh basically filming themselves being laid off and then posting it online. And I'm really intrigued by it. I'd love to even get into a discussion about this further on the podcast because I think it's y- you know
The Gen
one
Xer in me is horrified at this
yeah,
decision, but I'm wondering if there is something liberating
well,
here.
I think that's the thing. It's like sometimes you take away, it's like we've discussed about taking away the shame of things. Um, one thing that became apparent is why this is also happening. Could it be tied to the fact that many people now work from home? And therefore, the way you know, this is different. When you used to go into the office, if something like that happened, you probably didn't, you didn't have the access so easily to film being fight. Now you can, and you could share it with people. And yeah, I think for some people it is a release. I don't know, after reading the article and reading how that was the interesting part too, because my instinct, again, being Gen X also, um, was feeling like, wow, won't this make it more difficult for you to get a job? And apparently many of them saying that I don't know where they are right now, but they were saying that some people were reaching out to them. I mean, I think we do live in a time where if you are talented and good at what you're doing, I would hope people would would be given an opportunity. But yeah, I don't know. It's something where I'm sort of absorbing because it's not something I would have ever thought of doing or I would have done. So, but I'm interested in hearing more, and even delving into this and bringing somebody on and talking about this because I do think it's something that feels so scary, when you hear, listen, getting laid off sucks.
Yeah.
And I can understand why for some people they could feel that way. But again, I don't know where, yeah, I'm just so it's intriguing. So those two articles were the ones that I would say recommend read and go with an open mind. So yeah, I
All
guess
right.
yeah, that's it, Jenna.
Well, last thing to say, in terms of being accountability partners, I will admit I did not post to my Substack yet, but that was because I had such a busy and glorious week this week. So I still have time to get it done for this week.
Yes. I'm tired. I'll have mine done by Friday and we can put it in the notes in our show notes where
There we
they can
go.
find our stuff. I'll be on Medium.
All right. So in the meantime, as we keep saying, if you want to reach out to us, we have an
Yes.
email address, laidofandlookingpod@gmail.com. We're going to put, links to all of the articles that we mentioned in the show notes. And again, my Substack, soon to be Dom's Medium account, that will also be in the show notes. You can follow us anywhere. I work my butt off to make that
She
possible.
does.
So
She
please.
does.
And I think that's it. I guess just give us a like and a follow and a
Yeah.
share if you think that
Yes.
we're having a conversation that you think is worthwhile. If the um, thoughts that you might be having as a laid off individual, even if you're not a journalist, you're like, but wait, I've wondered that too.
And
Give
and
us
I
a
want
like,
to
a share, and a comment.
and I want to thank honestly all the journalists today that we've read articles on the show. Um, I'm throwing it out there in energy wise because I appreciate the work, the good work that everybody's doing, and hopefully, by sharing this with everybody, it helps you too. So, and thank you, Jenna.
No, thank you, Dom.
All
All
right,
right.
bye everyone.
Until next time. Bye.
Bye.